The altimeter was a blur of spinning needles. John Jeffrey didn't scream. He was too busy fighting the yoke of the C-130 Hercules, his forearms bulging as hydraulics whined in protest. The sky outside wasn't just dark, it was a bruising purple, lit by flashes of lightning that didn't behave like electricity. They looked like veins pulsing in the clouds. Mayday, mayday, this is Cargo Flight 7 Alpha. We are experiencing total instrument failure, coordinates unknown. John roared into the headset, but the only response was a shriek of static that sounded dangerously like laughter. The electromagnetic interference hadn't just killed the engines, it had killed the physics of the plane. The heavy bird dropped like a stone. John saw the ocean rushing up an expanse of churning black water and then, shockingly, a smudge of green. An island, uncharted, impossible. He hauled back on the stick, aiming for the canopy. The trees shattered the windshield. Metal screamed against wood. The world tumbled end over end in a violent kaleidoscope of glass, foliage, and fire. John woke up hanging upside down, the blood rushing to his head, pounding in rhythm with the hissing of a ruptured fuel line. He cut his harness, dropping into the damp, mossy floor of the jungle. His survival instinct, honed by a decade of flying into war zones and remote outposts, kicked in before the pain did. Get away from the wreck. He scrambled 50 yards into the brush just as the fuel tanks ignited. The explosion rocked the ground, sending a plume of black smoke into the twilight sky. John leaned against a massive banyan tree, checking his ribs. Cracked, maybe. Not broken. He had his survival knife, a flare gun with 2 rounds, and a half-empty canteen. He looked at the burning wreckage. It was a beacon. If anyone was looking for him, they'd see it. But as the night deepened, a chilling realization settled in. The jungle wasn't silent. Usually, a crash silences the local fauna for hours. Here, the noise had increased. Chittering, hissing, and something else, a low, vibrato thrumming that he felt in his teeth. He wasn't alone. But looking at the shadows stretching across the sand, John realized with a jolt that the rescue he hoped for wasn't coming. The radio had picked up a signal right before the crash. Not a tower, but a localized broadcast. Asset acquisition initiated. Someone had brought him down. And now, from the darkness of the tree line, 2 golden lights flickered on. Eyes, watching him. By the second day, John Jeffrey knew he was being herded. He had tried to move toward the coast, hoping to find a beach and set up a signal fire. But every time he veered south, the jungle pushed him back. Thorn bushes that seemed to move when he wasn't looking. Swarms of biting insects that only attacked when he stepped off the faint game trail. The trail led inland, toward the mountain that dominated the island's center. Thirst was becoming a hallucination. He licked dew off fern leaves, but it wasn't enough. He needed a stream. Don't drink from the black pools. The voice croaked from a hole in the ground. John spun around, knife drawn. A man, or what was left of one, peered out from beneath the roots of a dead tree. He was bearded, filth-caked, wearing the tattered remains of a naval uniform from the 1982nd. "Who are you?" John demanded, his voice rasping. "Miller. Castaway Miller. That's what the whispers call me." The man giggled. Then his eyes widened in terror. He pointed a trembling finger at the canopy above John. "You're marked. I smell her scent on you. The shadow cat." John looked up. "Nothing but leaves. I need water, Miller. Where is it?" "The sun shrines," Miller hissed, retreating into his hole. "But you can't go. She guards them. Or, she can't enter them? I forget. The rules change when the moon bleeds." Miller grabbed John's ankle with a grip like iron. "Listen to me, pilot. She isn't an animal. She's a warden. And we are the cattle. If she offers you a deal, don't take it. Just die. It's quicker." "I'm not planning on dying." John yanked his leg free. "Then you'll serve," Miller shrieked as John walked away. "But remember the first law. Do not look upon the shadow when it sleeps. The vulnerability. It's a trap." John pushed on, Miller's laughter fading behind him. The warning seemed nonsensical, the ramblings of a madman. But as the sun began to set, the temperature dropped unnaturally. The jungle floor turned to obsidian stone. He had reached the foothills of the mountain, and there, blocking the path, was a gate. Not natural, but carved. Ancient stone pillars wrapped in vines. Beyond them, he could hear the rush of a waterfall. Water. He took a step forward, and the shadows detached themselves from the rocks. John froze. The silence here was absolute. No birds, no insects, no wind, just the sound of his own heart hammering against his ribs. The area beyond the pillars looked like a ruined temple courtyard. In the center, a pool of crystal-clear water was fed by a spring. It was tantalizing. One step further. A voice purred, seemingly coming from everywhere and nowhere. "And you will be meat." It wasn't a human voice. It was layered, like a woman speaking over the growl of a tiger. John held his ground, gripping his knife, though he knew it was useless. "I just want water." "Water is life," the voice replied. "And on this island, life has a price." From the darkness of a cave mouth at the far end of the courtyard, the sound of metal scraping on stone echoed. Clink, drag, clink. Chains? No. Jewelry. Heavy, ancient gold. "I am John Jeffrey," he said, trying to project authority. "I am a pilot. I can be of use." "Use?" A low, chuffing laugh. "My last pet was useful, until he broke the rules. I'm not a pet. We shall see." The air shimmered. "The barrier you stand before. It burns my kind. Ancient magic. Petty, but effective. I cannot reach the spring to cleanse the stagnation from my own pool. You, being a soulless mortal, can walk right through." John understood immediately. "You want me to be your water boy. I want you to serve." The voice snapped, sharp and dangerous. "Bring the water to the basin outside the pillars. Fill it daily. In exchange, the lesser beasts, the ones that tore your metal bird apart, will not touch you. You will sleep under my protection." John looked at the water. Then he looked at the dark jungle behind him, where he knew things were waiting to eat him. "Deal," John said. "But I want to see who I'm working for." "Careful what you wish for, John Jeffrey." The darkness in the cave mouth shifted. First, John saw the eyes, luminous, vertical slit pupils of molten gold, floating 7 feet off the ground. Then, she stepped into the twilight. She was a nightmare of beauty and terror. Kaelia stood on 2 legs, towering over him. Her body was a hybrid perfection humanoid structure, but covered in sleek, obsidian fur that seemed to absorb the light. Her hands were tipped with razor-sharp talons, yet her arms bore bands of intricate gold. A long, sinuous tail flicked behind her with agitation. But it was her face that stopped John's breath. It wasn't a snout, but a flattened, feline human visage. High cheekbones, a small nose, and a mouth that held too many teeth. She was terrifying, yes, but there was an elegance to her posture that commanded respect. She wasn't a monster. She was a queen in exile. "Well," Kaelia growled, her ears pinning back. "Does the sight of your master displease you?" "I've seen worse," John lied, though his knees were shaking. He forced himself to turn his back on her, a calculated risk, and walked through the invisible barrier to the spring. He filled his canteen, then found a large, cracked clay vessel. He filled that too. He walked back to the edge of the barrier and set the vessel down. Kaelia approached. She moved with a fluid grace that made her seem weightless. She dipped a clawed hand into the water, bringing it to her lips. She watched him over the rim of the vessel. "You do not run," she observed. "Nowhere to run," John said. "Plus, we have a deal." For a moment, the predatory gaze softened into something like curiosity. "Go to the lower cave," she dismissed him with a wave of her hand. "Sleep, but remember the madman's warning. My den is forbidden. My slumber is private. Violate this, and I will eat your heart before you can scream." Survival became a routine. For 2 weeks, John lived in the lower cave. He gathered fruit, he fixed the roof of his shelter, and every morning, he hauled water for Kaelia. In return, she left him carcasses, wild boars, large flightless birds freshly killed and left at his entrance. It was a transactional relationship, cold and distant, until the typhoon hit. It came out of the east, a black wall of wind and rain that snapped trees like matchsticks. John's lower cave was prone to flooding. As the water rose to his waist, freezing and churning with mud, he knew he couldn't stay. He grabbed his flare gun and scrambled up the rock face toward the main temple. The wind howled, threatening to peel him off the stone. He reached the upper plateau, shivering violently. The entrance to Kaelia's lair was the only dry ground. He stood at the entrance, shouting over the roar of the storm. "Kaelia! The lower cave is flooded!" No answer. Lightning struck a nearby tree, blinding him. The thunder was deafening. Driven by instinct, John ran inside the forbidden lair. It was warm inside, dry. The air smelled of musk and ozone. He huddled near the entrance, intending to stay only until the worst passed. But the storm raged for hours. Exhaustion overtook him. He curled up against the stone wall, shivering, and closed his eyes. He woke up to silence. The storm had passed, and he realized, with a jolt of pure adrenaline, that he was deep inside the lair, and he wasn't alone. A shaft of morning sunlight pierced through a fissure in the ceiling, illuminating a stone dais in the center of the cavern. There lay Kaelia. She was asleep. John remembered the rule: do not look. He started to back away, his heart thudding, but he couldn't help it. The creature on the stone didn't look like the apex predator that ruled the island. She was curled up, looking smaller. Her fur was matted in places, and now, in the clear light, John saw them scars. Brutal, jagged lines of silver scar tissue running down her back and across her ribs. Brands, burn marks. She wasn't just a monster. She was an escaped prisoner. She whimpered in her sleep, her paws twitching like a dreaming house cat. It was such a human, vulnerable sound that John's fear evaporated, replaced by a sudden, sharp pang of empathy. He took a step back, and his boot scuffed a loose rock. The sound echoed like a gunshot. Kaelia erupted from sleep. She didn't wake up groggy. She went from 0 to lethal instantly. She was on him before he could blink, pinning him to the floor, her massive hand around his throat, claws digging into his skin. "You looked," she roared, her face inches from his. "You saw. I saw the scars." John choked out, holding his hands up in surrender. "I saw what they did to you." Kaelia froze. Her golden eyes were wide, vibrating with rage and shame. She tightened her grip, ready to snap his neck. "They hurt you," John rasped. "The people before me, they hurt you." The tension in her arm trembled. Slowly the claws retracted. She pulled back, hissing, and turned away, wrapping her tail around herself as if to hide the marks. "They were collectors," she whispered, her voice sounding almost human. "They wanted a specimen. I killed them all. But I cannot kill the memories." She looked back at him, her gaze searching. "Why didn't you kill me while I slept? You had your knife." "That wasn't the deal," John said, rubbing his throat. Kaelia studied him. For the first time, she didn't look at him like meat, she looked at him like an equal. The dynamic shifted. The wall of ice between them had shattered. John no longer just fetched water. He began to explore the island with her. He learned that Kaelia could shapeshift into a smaller, panther-sized cat to move through the dense brush, only taking her hybrid form when she needed dexterity or speech. He fixed things for her. He built a proper fire pit in the lair so she could have warmth without smoke choking the cave. She, in turn, taught him how to hunt the island's bizarre wildlife. She showed him which berries cured infection and which ones stopped the heart. They sat by the fire one night, eating roasted boar. "Why this island?" John asked. "It is a cage," Kaelia said, poking the fire with a claw. "Built by your ancestors to hold my kind. The wards prevent me from leaving the shoreline. I am the last. The others starved or went mad." "I can get you out," John said. "I'm a pilot. If we can signal a ship." "Men do not want to free me, John. They want to dissect me." "Not all men." She looked at him, the firelight dancing in her golden eyes. A low purr rumbled in her chest, a sound of contentment he hadn't heard before. "Perhaps," she said softly. "Perhaps not all." The moment was broken by a sound that chilled John's blood. A low, rhythmic thumping in the distance. Chop, chop, chop. John stood up, extinguishing the fire. "Rotors." John and Kaelia raced to the cliff edge overlooking the beach. Hovering over the wreckage of John's C-130 was a black V-22 Osprey. It bore no military markings, only a stylized logo of a double helix, Vargas Biosolutions. Ropes dropped. Men in black tactical gear fast roped down. They weren't rescue workers. They carried shock rifles and heavy containment nets. "They found me," John whispered. "No," Kaelia snarled, her hackles rising. "They found us." Leading them was a man in a tropical suit, holding a tablet. Captain Vargas. His voice, amplified by a loudspeaker, drifted up the cliff. "Mr. Jeffrey, we know you're alive. We have your beacon signature. Bring us the specimen, and we will take you home. $1 million, Mr. Jeffrey. And a first-class ticket to civilization." John looked at Kaelia. She was trembling not with fear, but with the anticipation of violence. "Go," she said coldly. "Take their deal. It is what your kind does." "I told you." John checked the load on his flare gun. "I'm not a pet, and I don't break deals." Below them, the mercenaries began setting up tripods, sonic cannons. "They're going to flush the jungle," John realized. "Kaelia, you need to hide. The caves." "This is my territory," she roared. And before John could stop her, she leaped from the cliff, shifting midair into her massive beast form, plummeting toward the beach like a shadow of death. The battle on the beach was a chaotic blur of noise and fury. Kaelia hit the sand like a meteor, smashing two mercenaries aside. She moved faster than they could track, a whirlwind of claws and teeth. But Vargas was prepared. "Activate the emitters!" Vargas screamed. A high-pitched whine tore through the air. It was a frequency designed to scramble the nervous system of apex predators. Kaelia screamed a sound of pure agony and collapsed, writhing in the sand. She tried to shift back to humanoid form, but the pain locked her muscles. "Net her. Now." The nets flew, weighted, and electrified. They wrapped around her, shocking her into submission. John watched from the tree line. He had one shot. He sprinted across the sand, not toward the men, but toward the fuel tanks of the Osprey. "Pilot!" Vargas shouted, spotting him. "Don't be a fool." John raised the flare gun. "She's not for sale, Vargas!" He fired. The flare hissed through the air and punched into the Osprey's open fuel hatch. Boom. The explosion was massive. The shockwave knocked the sonic emitters over. The whining stopped. On the ground, the nets sparked and died. Kaelia's eyes snapped open. The pain was gone. Only rage remained. She shredded the nets like wet paper. She rose, towering in her hybrid form, silhouetted against the burning helicopter. The mercenaries broke and ran. Vargas pulled a pistol, but John tackled him. They wrestled in the surf, John landing a heavy blow that knocked Vargas cold. He looked up. Kaelia stood over the remaining mercenaries. She could have slaughtered them all. But she paused, looking at John. He shook his head. She let out a huff of breath and roared, sending the survivors scrambling into the jungle, weaponless and terrified. The sun rose over a smoking beach. The Osprey was a skeleton of twisted metal. Vargas and his men were gone, fled to the other side of the island or taken by the jungle. John sat on a piece of driftwood, nursing a broken nose. Kaelia sat next to him. She was grooming her arm, licking a cut closed. "You destroyed your ride home," she said. Her voice was quiet. "It was a lousy flight anyway," John grimaced. He looked out at the ocean. Bobbing in the surf, tied to a rock, was the mercenaries' inflatable Zodiac boat. It had fuel, it had supplies, it was a way out. Kaelia saw him looking at it. She stood up and walked to the boat. With one claw, she slashed the mooring rope. "Go," she said. "The wards do not hold you. You have fulfilled your deal." John stood up. He walked to the water's edge. The boat was drifting out. He could swim to it. He could start the motor and be in shipping lanes in 2 days. He looked at the horizon. Then he looked back at the island, at the green hell that had almost killed him, at the monster that had saved him. Kaelia watched him, her golden eyes unreadable. John sighed, reached into his pocket, and pulled out the last of his beef jerky. He tore it in half and tossed a piece to her. "I can't leave yet," John said. "Vargas might come back. Someone has to watch the perimeter." Kaelia caught the food. A slow, sharp grin spread across her face. She turned and began walking back toward the tree line, her tail swaying. "Keep up, pilot," she called back. "I am not carrying you up the mountain." John smiled, turned his back on the boat, and followed the shadow cat into the jungle.